South China Sea, Second Thomas Shoal. The water here is shallow and warm and contested in a way that would strike a reasonable person as disproportionate to what is, geographically speaking, a reef. The People's Republic of China has claimed it. The Philippines has claimed it. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea has an opinion about it. An international arbitration tribunal delivered a binding ruling about it in 2016. The PRC reviewed that ruling and declined to acknowledge it, which is one approach to international law, though not the one most maritime lawyers would recommend. What sits on the reef is the BRP Sierra Madre, a deliberately grounded Philippine Navy vessel, rusting with impressive commitment since 1999, crewed by a rotation of Filipino Marines whose job is to be present on the structure and thereby assert the Philippines' territorial claim through the ancient and legally robust method of simply staying there. The Sierra Madre is not a warship in any operational sense, or it is a statement made of corroding steel. The statement reads, "This reef is ours, we have people on it, and we would appreciate if you stopped trying to make them leave." Resupplying those Marines requires boats. Those boats have to travel through water the PRC has decided is its own. This generates, on a regular basis, a confrontation between small Philippine resupply vessels and large China Coast Guard cutters that has been described, depending on who is describing it, as either a lawful enforcement of sovereign rights or a systematic harassment campaign against a smaller nation's legitimate resupply mission. The arbitration tribunal had an opinion on this characterization too. Beijing filed that opinion next to the previous one. That morning, 2 Philippine resupply vessels departed their staging point carrying food, water, and medical supplies for the Sierra Madre's Marine Detachment. The E-2D Advanced Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft orbiting at 22,000 feet, 60 miles to the east, had both vessels on track before they cleared the harbor. It also had the China Coast Guard formation that was already moving to intercept them. 4 CCG Type 054 cutters. The largest displaces 12,000 tons. For context, that is larger than most guided missile destroyers. They are equipped with high-pressure water cannon systems deck-mounted with traversing capability, capable of projecting a column of water with enough force to sweep personnel from a deck, flood engine compartments on smaller vessels, and render navigation equipment inoperable through sustained application. They carry no weapons in the conventional military sense. No missile cells, no gun mounts above a certain caliber. They are on paper law enforcement vessels. On paper. In practice, the 4 CCG cutters approaching the Philippine resupply route this morning are moving in a coordinated formation that responds to naval command and control, maintains station-keeping intervals consistent with military doctrine, and executes intercept maneuvers tasked from a shore-based operations center. They fish for nothing. They enforce nothing that an independent court would recognize as legitimate. They are the maritime equivalent of a very large person standing in a doorway and insisting with apparent sincerity that they're simply waiting for a friend. The friend in this analogy is Chinese sovereignty over waters the size of Western Europe, which has been waiting since approximately the moment it became strategically convenient to claim them. The E-2D crew logged the intercept geometry, transmitted the picture via Link 16 to the USS Carl Vinson carrier strike group, and continued its orbit. 40 miles to the east, the USS Carl Vinson, CVN-70, Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, 97,000 tons, 80-plus aircraft embarked, a crew of 5,000, was conducting flight operations with the professional indifference of an institution that has been the dominant naval force in the Pacific for the better part of 8 decades. The Carrier Strike Group's Tactical Action Officer looked at the E-2D feed, noted the CCG formation, noted the Philippine vessels, noted the intercept geometry, and composed a situation update for the battle group commander. It took about 90 seconds. Then he went back to monitoring his primary display, which had approximately 400 other contacts on it simultaneously. The CCG had not factored the Carl Vinson into its operational planning for the morning. This was a mistake of the type that tends to become instructive. The lead CCG cutter reached the Philippine vessels and the water cannons came online. Let us be precise about what a high-pressure water cannon does to a small wooden resupply boat. The CCG's systems generate water pressure sufficient to sweep a person off a deck, breach basic hull fittings, and render navigation equipment inoperable through flooding. Against a small civilian pattern vessel making perhaps 8 knots, the effect is significant. The Philippine crews were experienced with this, they had been through it before on previous resupply runs, and they had developed techniques for managing the approach under water cannon engagement. Maintain heading, protect the crew, keep moving. The supplies had to get through. The Marines on the Sierra Madre needed to eat. For approximately 4 minutes, the tactical situation was genuinely concerning. The lead CCG cutter had positioned to cut off the primary approach vector. A second cutter was moving to block the secondary. The Philippine vessels were taking water cannon fire, and their options were narrowing. The rules of engagement governing the U.S. response to this situation did not extend to kinetic intervention against Coast Guard vessels deploying water cannons against a third party, regardless of how obviously those Coast Guard vessels were operating as de facto military assets. This is the genuine constraint. A carrier strike group can project force across 500 miles of ocean in under an hour. It cannot, however, resolve every problem with the tools it carries, because not every problem presents itself in a form that those tools are authorized to address. The CCG had designed its harassment apparatus precisely around this gap. Coast Guard designations, non-weapon systems, plausible law enforcement framing, because the gap is real, and the PRC has been exploiting it methodically for years. The water cannons are not missiles. The cutters are not warships. The ROE does not cover them in the same way. The United States had a carrier strike group 40 miles away and could not, under the applicable rules of engagement, simply solve the problem in the way that a carrier strike group technically has the capability to solve most problems. What it could do was watch, document, transmit, and make its presence known through channels that do not appear in any targeting database. This is the part of these stories that tends to generate the most interesting decisions. The battle group commander authorized a change in the flight operations schedule. 2 A-18E Super Hornets that had been slated for a morning training sortie were redirected. Their new tasking was described in the operational log as a maritime awareness transit. The transit route went directly over Second Thomas Shoal, at low altitude, with the transponders on. An E-2D controller vectored the P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, which had been operating 30 miles to the north, south toward the shoal at best cruise speed. Its mission package was already running. It would arrive in approximately 6 minutes. Minutes later, the CCG formation began to receive data it had not previously incorporated into its planning. The E-2D crew had the complete picture before anyone on the water did. At an altitude of 22,000 feet, the E-2D advanced Hawkeye's AN/APY-9 radar was tracking every surface contact within a 200-mile radius with a fidelity that made the tactical picture look less like a radar display and more like a live overhead photograph. The Philippine vessels, the CCG formation, the approach geometries, the water cannon engagement, all of it was rendered in precise timestamp detail and distributed in real time to every platform in the battle group via Link 16. The E-2D crew was also tracking the 2 FA-18Es, which had departed the Carl Vinson's flight deck minutes earlier and were currently climbing through 12,000 feet on a heading that would put them over Second Thomas Shoal in approximately 4 minutes. The crew logged the intercept geometry with the focused calm of professionals who had done this many times and understood exactly what the next several minutes were going to look like. 2 Hornets, inbound, 4 minutes. The E-2D controller reported on the tactical frequency. P-8 inbound, 6 minutes. CCG formation. 4 contacts maintaining engagement with Philippine vessels. Lead cutter has water cannon active. The battle group commander acknowledged. Keep the picture current. Copy. Picture is current, sir. The E-2D crew went back to their displays. The picture was very current. It was also, from a documentation standpoint, extremely comprehensive. Every maneuver the CCG formation had executed since dawn was in the track history. The patrol patterns, the intercept geometries, the coordination timing between cutters, the positioning relative to the shoal, all of it logged, time-stamped, and queued for the intelligence summary that would go to Pacific Fleet by noon. The CCG had spent the morning demonstrating its operational playbook. The E-2D had been taking notes. The two A-18E Super Hornets arrived over Second Thomas Shoal at 1,000 feet and 350 knots. A Super Hornet at 1,000 feet is not subtle. It is loud in the way that physics makes unavoidable when you push 23,000 pounds of thrust through a relatively compact airframe at subsonic but thoroughly committed speed. It has an electronic emission profile that is clearly identifiable to any surface vessel equipped with a radar warning receiver, which all 4 CCG cutters were. The lead Hornet passed directly over the CCG formation at 1,000 feet. The second followed on a parallel track, offset by approximately a quarter mile. Both aircraft were clean. No weapons employed, no targeting systems active, no aggressive maneuvering. They were, in every formal and technical sense, conducting a transit. The effect on the CCG formation was immediate and observable from the E-2D's radar picture. The lead cutter began reducing its water cannon output of BR. Approximately 15 seconds after the first Hornet's sonic signature reached the surface. Within seconds, the water cannons were inactive. 90 seconds later, the lead cutter had altered course away from the Philippine vessel's primary approach vector. On the Carl Vinson, the tactical action officer noted the CCG course change in the log and updated the situation report. In the E-2D, the controller watched the picture shift with an expression that his colleagues would later describe as quietly satisfied, which is the maximum emotional expressiveness available to a naval flight officer during an active mission. On the weather deck of the Carl Vinson, a petty officer doing scheduled maintenance on a deck fitting heard the Hornets depart on their transit heading and did not look up. Super Hornets launching and recovering were the ambient noise of life on a carrier. If he noticed anything at all, it was that these two seemed to come back sooner than usual. He went back to his work. The deck wasn't going to maintain itself. Here is what the P-8A Poseidon was compiling during its arrival and subsequent orbit over the area, because this is the section that distinguishes a routine maritime incident from a productive morning for U.S. intelligence. The P-8 arrived over Second Thomas Shoal to find that the CCG formation was in the process of reconsidering its morning's agenda. The mission systems package was running at full collection fidelity. Optical sensors documenting the CCG vessel positions and identification, the ESM suite characterizing the radar emissions of all 4 cutters, the communications intelligence package monitoring the CCG's internal coordination frequencies. What the P-8 documented over the following 40 minutes was, from an intelligence standpoint, a comprehensive operational profile of the CCG's Second Thomas Shoal harassment playbook, the intercept approach geometry, the cutter positioning relative to the reef and the resupply route, the coordination timing, how the formation split to block primary and secondary approach vectors, how long the water cannon engagement was maintained before the lead cutter checked for external factors, the exact response time between the arrival of a new contact and the formation's behavioral change. This last data point is worth examining. The CCG formation's response to the F/A-18 overflight, water cannons inactive in 15 seconds, course change in 90 seconds, is a calibration reference. It defines the threshold at which the CCG's harassment calculus changes. That threshold is now documented. The specific stimuli, the specific response time, the specific behavioral modification. A future mission planner who needs to know what level of presence is required to interrupt a CCG harassment operation at Second Thomas Shoal now has empirical data. The CCG, in attempting to harass a Philippine resupply mission, had provided the U.S. Navy with a detailed operational study of CCG harassment tactics and their countermeasures. The study was free. It was conducted live. It was comprehensive. And it was distributed to Pacific Fleet, Indo-Pacific Command, and relevant Allied intelligence partners before the CCG formation had completed its withdrawal from the area. The Philippine resupply vessels reached the BRP Sierra Madre. The supplies were transferred. The Marine detachment was fed, resupplied, and formally present on a reef that the PRC had been attempting to isolate for years. The BRP Sierra Madre continued to rust in the manner that has characterized its existence since the Ramos administration, which is itself a form of strategic persistence that deserves a degree of respect independent of the structural engineering concerns. The CCG formation held a position approximately 12 miles from the shoal for the remainder of the morning. The P-8 continued its orbit. The E-2D continued its surveillance. The Carl Vinson recovered the two F-A-18Es and resumed its scheduled flight operations. The Hornet crews filed their transit logs, noted the maritime activity at Second Thomas Shoal, and went to the wardroom for breakfast. The transit had taken 23 minutes. The CCG had been engaged in its harassment operation for approximately 18 minutes before the Hornets arrived. The resupply mission had succeeded. The intelligence package was substantial. No munitions were employed. No aggressive maneuvers were conducted. No formal confrontation occurred. 2 aircraft flew over a reef at 1,000 feet, and the situation resolved. The Carl Vinson's operational log noted the event in 4 sentences. Now let us talk about proportionality, because proportionality is where this morning's cost structure achieves a particular kind of irony. The USS Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group represents, when fully constituted, an approximately $13 billion operational asset. Add the escort destroyers, the air wing, the logistics support, and the associated infrastructure, and you are describing an investment of national resources at a scale that requires its own budget line. The 2 FA-18Es that transited over Second Thomas Shoal represent roughly $60 million in airframe value each. The E-2D is a $300 million platform. The P-8 runs approximately $290 million per airframe. The CCG deployed water cannons against wooden resupply boats. The United States responded with a $13 billion carrier group's organic aviation assets. The CCG backed off in 90 seconds. Somewhere in the Indo-Pacific Command Budget Office, an analyst is noting that the cost-per-outcome ratio of this particular morning's operation, measured in terms of CCG behavioral modification per dollar of U.S. assets deployed, is technically favorable, but that the absolute numbers involved are the kind of thing that requires context to explain to congressional appropriators. The context is, that is how deterrence works in the South China Sea in 2025. It is not cheap. It is effective. The 2 Hornet pilots got flight hours. In the U.S. Navy, flight hours are currency. They were not displeased about the transit routing. The intelligence summary assembled from the E-2D tracking data and the P-8 collection package reached Pacific Fleet by noon. It ran to 9 pages. The executive summary noted that the CCG formation had executed a textbook harassment intercept against the Philippine resupply mission, that the formation's response to U.S. aerial presence was consistent with established behavioral parameters, and that the morning's collection had meaningfully updated the operational profile of CCG harassment tactics at Second Thomas Shoal. It also noted that the BRP Sierra Madre resupply had been completed successfully. This was filed under Mission Outcomes, positive. By afternoon, Chinese state media had a story. The story described the morning's events as a successful enforcement operation by China Coast Guard vessels lawfully maintaining order in Chinese sovereign waters. The CCG had professionally and lawfully handled the Philippine vessel's illegal intrusion. Chinese sovereignty had been firmly defended. The CCG's conduct had been measured, professional, and proportionate. Let us examine the claim of proportionality first because it is the one that invites the most direct comparison. 4 12,000-ton Coast Guard cutters deploying high-pressure water cannon systems against small resupply boats, crewed by people trying to bring food to a dozen Marines on a rusting ship, is, by most civilian standards, not an image that evokes proportionality. The broadcast did not include footage of the water cannon engagement. It included footage of CCG vessels at sea with the Chinese flag prominent and a voiceover describing sovereign rights. The claim of successful enforcement is technically accurate in the same way that a rain delay is technically an interruption to a baseball game. Yes, the engagement occurred. Yes, the CCG deployed its systems. The resupply mission was, however, completed. The Marines on the Sierra Madre have food. The BRP Sierra Madre is still there. The reef remains under Philippine occupation. in the sense that matters legally, which is the physical presence of Philippine government personnel on it. The enforcement that the CCG claims to have conducted produced none of the outcomes enforcement is typically designed to produce. The claim regarding Chinese sovereign waters carries its own complexity, which the 2016 Arbitration Tribunal addressed at length in a binding ruling that China formally rejects. This is one of those situations where the phrase "agree to disagree" does not quite capture the dynamic, since one party's position has the backing of international law, and the other party's position has the backing of a very large Coast Guard fleet. Both of these things are real. Only one of them is legal. What the broadcast did not mention, that a U.S. carrier strike group was 40 miles away and had the entire engagement on track from first contact. That two F-A-18Es conducted a transit over the shoal and the water cannons went inactive 15 seconds later. That the CCG's complete operational playbook for Second Thomas Shoal harassment operations is now documented in a Pacific Fleet intelligence summary. That the response time between U.S. aerial presence and CCG behavioral modification is calibrated and on file. Chinese state media is produced by professionals working from a specific editorial framework. The framework does not include the E-2D's track history, the P-8's collection summary, or the detail that the CCG formation spent the rest of the morning 12 miles from a reef it had spent the morning claiming as sovereign territory, because the Carl Vinson was still in the area, and the Carl Vinson was still flying. The BRP Sierra Madre is still on the reef. The Philippine Marines had a hot meal. The CCG formation filed its own mission report, which presumably described a successful operation. The E-2D crew landed, debriefed, and went to sleep. The P-8 crew submitted a 9-page collection summary and went to lunch. The Carl Vinson recovered its aircraft and continued its scheduled operations. Second Thomas Shoal looks exactly like it did yesterday. The CCG knows that the threshold for U.S. aerial response is documented. The U.S. knows that the CCG's behavioral modification threshold is documented. Both parties have a more complete understanding of the other's operational parameters than they did that morning. The BRP Sierra Madre rusts on. It has been rusting since 1999. It intends to rust indefinitely. Rust in the South China Sea turns out to be a form of strategy. Bye for now.